I had spent 3 years mastering the art of invisibility, but in a single heartbeat, Dominic Vance tore down my walls and threw me to the wolves. Welcome back to the channel. If you are ready to get lost in a new, intense story full of obsession, romance, and drama, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. We want to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below. Now let's begin. Part 1. The Shadow and the Sun. The air in the Grand Hall of St. Halloway's University was not just oxygen and nitrogen. It was composed entirely of perfume, hairspray, and desperation. It was the night of the Ascension Gala, a ridiculous, archaic tradition that the university administration pretended was about networking and alumni mentorship. But everyone knew the truth. It was a marketplace. It was the night when the elite students, the heirs to conglomerates, the sons of politicians, the alphas of our social hierarchy, chose their partners for the final year's capstone project. And I, Elian Thorne, was trying very hard to become one with the velvet curtains. I wasn't a participant. God, no. I was a scholarship student, which in the eyes of St. Halloway's elite, made me something between a charity case and a piece of furniture. While the Omegas and Betas in their shimmering silk suits and designer gowns postured for attention in the center of the room, I was standing in the shadows of the catering station, holding a silver tray of untouched champagne flutes. "Straighten your tie, Thorne," hissed the floor manager, a man named Mr. Henderson who seemed to believe that a scholarship student's existence was a personal insult to his payroll. "You look like you're waiting for a bus, not serving the future leaders of the nation." "Sorry, sir," I mumbled, adjusting the cheap polyester clip-on tie that was slowly strangling me. "And stop slouching. If you drop a single glass, it's coming out of your stipend." He bustled away to scold a girl who had dared to sneeze near the shrimp tower. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and leaned back against the cool stone wall. My feet ached. I had been working since 5 a.m., first at the campus library shelving books, then at the coffee shop down the street, and now here. My life was a simple equation: survive, graduate, vanish. I had 1 year left. Just 1 year of enduring the whispers, the sneers, and the casual cruelty of people who had never checked a price tag in their lives. I was a ghost. That was my strategy. I didn't speak unless spoken to. I didn't make eye contact. I wore oversized hoodies and glasses that were slightly too big for my face, hiding the features that my mother used to say were delicate. Here, delicate was blood in the water. A sudden hush fell over the room, rippling out from the massive double doors like a shockwave. The chatter stopped. The clinking of glasses ceased. Even the string quartet seemed to falter for a beat. He was here. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. There was only one person at St. Halloway who commanded that kind of terrified reverence: Dominic Vance. The Vance family practically owned the city. Real estate, tech, shipping. If it made money, a Vance was signing the checks. And Dominic was the crown prince. He was everything a romance novel hero was supposed to be, and everything a real human being shouldn't be. He was 6 feet 2 inches of pure, unadulterated coldness. I risked a glance. I shouldn't have, but curiosity is a traitorous thing. He stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at the sea of students like a god surveying a particularly disappointing creation. He wore a black tuxedo that fit him so perfectly it looked like it had been spun from shadows. His hair was dark, swept back from a forehead that was currently creased in boredom. But it was his eyes that froze you. They were gray, not the soft gray of a cloud, but the hard, metallic gray of a loaded gun. He began to descend. The crowd parted. It was pathetic, really. Students who were heirs to millions of dollars scrambled out of his way like frightened deer. Dominic didn't acknowledge them. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He walked with a lazy, predatory grace, one hand in his pocket, the other hanging loose at his side. Behind him trailed his court, a group of other high-ranking alphas who laughed too loud and took up too much space. But Dominic walked alone, even when surrounded. "He's going to pick Julianne," whispered a girl near the drinks table. She was clutching her friend's arm, so hard her knuckles were white. "It has to be Julianne. Her father is the senator." "No way," the friend hissed back. He rejected her at the spring formal. "I heard he's going to pick someone from the business track. Maybe Marcus." "Marcus? Please." Dominic would eat Marcus alive. I looked down at my tray, focusing on the bubbles rising in the champagne. "Don't look. Don't listen. You are furniture." The Ascension Gala wasn't just a party, it was a ritual. The top alphas would publicly invite a partner to join their table. Accepting meant you were set for life. It meant connections, protection, and a guaranteed A on the capstone. Rejecting. Well, no one rejected an alpha. Especially not Dominic Vance. I watched through my lashes as Dominic reached the bottom of the stairs. A young man, beautiful and glowing in a white suit, Julianne, the senator's son, stepped forward. He was the swan of the academy. Perfect grades, perfect face, perfect pedigree. Dominic, Julian said, his voice breathless. He offered a hand, a smile plastered on his face that screamed, "Pick me, love me." I saved a seat for you at the center table. We could discuss the merger simulation for the project. The room held its breath. This was it, the union of two powerhouses. Dominic stopped. He looked at Julianne's outstretched hand, then up at his face. His expression didn't change. It remained a mask of bored indifference. "Julianne," Dominic said. His voice was deep, a rich baritone that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "You're wearing white linen perfume." Julianne blinked, his smile faltering. "Yes? It's custom-made." "It gives me a headache," Dominic said flatly. He stepped around Julianne as if the boy were a traffic cone. A collective gasp tore through the room. Julianne turned pale, his hand dropping to his side, humiliated in front of the entire school. Dominic kept walking. He moved through the crowd, and every step he took increased the tension in the room. He rejected the captain of the debate team with a single look. He ignored the attempts of the student body president to catch his eye. He was a shark swimming through a tank of tropical fish, uninterested in the colorful displays. I felt a strange sense of pity for them. They wanted him so badly, not realizing that he looked at them and saw nothing. He was cold. Not just cool-tempered, but frozen. There was rumors that he had no scent, a genetic anomaly for an alpha, or that he simply controlled his pheromones so tightly that no one was allowed to smell him. He was getting closer to the catering station. My heart gave a stupid, anxious thump. "Move," my brain screamed. "Get out of the way." I turned to retreat into the kitchen, intending to hide until he passed, but Mr. Henderson blocked the swinging door. "Where are you going?" he hissed. "Refill the tray." "Now." "But." "Now, Thorne." I grit my teeth and turned back around, clutching the tray. When I looked up, Dominic Vance was 10 feet away. And he had stopped. He wasn't looking at the crowd anymore. He wasn't looking at the chandeliers or the professors. He was looking at me. No, that was impossible. I was standing in the shadows, behind a decorative fern, wearing a waiter's uniform that was 2 sizes too big. I was invisible. I was the furniture. But those gray eyes were locked onto mine with terrifying precision. Time seemed to warp. The noise of the party faded into a dull roar, like the ocean in a shell. I felt exposed, stripped bare by that gaze. It wasn't a look of desire. It wasn't a look of recognition. It was a look of calculation. It was the look a predator gives when it finally spots the prey it has been tracking. He took a step toward me. I froze. My flight or fight response short-circuited. I just stood there, gripping the silver tray until my fingers went numb. "He's coming for a drink," I told myself desperately. "He's thirsty. That's all. Just offer him the champagne." Dominic walked past the heir to the Samsung fortune. He walked past the daughter of the university dean. He walked right up to the edge of the catering zone, crossing the invisible line that separated the guests from the help. He stopped in front of me. Up close, he was devastating. The harsh lights of the hall threw his cheekbones into sharp relief. I could smell him now, not perfume, but something distinct and overwhelming. It smelled like ozone, like the air right before a lightning strike, mixed with something dark and earthy, like rain on hot asphalt. It was intoxicating. I couldn't breathe. I lowered my head, staring at the perfectly polished tips of his shoes. "Champagne, sir?" My voice cracked. I hated myself for it. Dominic didn't answer. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I could feel the eyes of the entire room shifting toward us. Confusion. Disbelief. Why is Dominic Vance standing in front of the scholarship kid? "Look at me," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command, spoken in a tone that vibrated in my spine. Slowly, painfully, I lifted my chin. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were alive. They were sweeping over my face, taking in the glasses, the messy hair, the cheap tie. "Elian Thorne," he said. He knew my name. The shock of it nearly made me drop the tray. How? Why? I had never spoken to him. We had never shared a class. I was a ghost. "Ah, yes, sir." "Put the tray down." "Sir, I'm working." "I can't." "Put the tray down." He didn't raise his voice, but the authority in it was absolute. My hands trembled as I set the champagne tray on the table next to me. The glass clinked loudly in the silence. "Good," he murmured. He took a step closer. He was so close now that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I was backed against the wall. There was nowhere to run. "You have the highest GPA in the economics department," he said. It was a statement of fact, not a question. "You scored a perfect 100 on the advanced game theory final last semester. You work 3 jobs. You sleep an average of 4 hours a night." My mouth fell open. "How do you?" "I do my research," he cut me off. His gaze dropped to my hands, which were shaking at my sides. "You are efficient. You are desperate. And you are invisible." He said the word invisible like it was a compliment. "I don't understand," I whispered. "What do you want?" Dominic Vance smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a sharp, dangerous thing, a baring of teeth that promised violence. "Everyone in this room is boring," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "They are predictable. They want my money, my name, or my body. They are peacocks preening for crumbs." He raised a hand and, with a gentleness that was terrifyingly at odds with his words, reached out and touched the frame of my glasses. His fingers brushed my temple, sending a jolt of electricity straight to my toes. "But you," he whispered, "you have nothing. And because you have nothing, you have everything to lose. That makes you interesting." He pulled his hand back and turned slightly, addressing the room without breaking eye contact with me. "I have made my choice." The room erupted into whispers. Mr. Henderson, the manager, was gaping like a fish. Julian looked like he was about to faint. "Dominic," a voice called out from the crowd, one of his alpha friends. "You can't be serious. He's a waiter." Dominic's eyes flashed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "He is my partner," Dominic declared, his voice ringing out clear and cold. "Anyone who has an issue with that can take it up with me. Personally." The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. No one moved. No one breathed. Dominic turned back to me. He extended his hand. Palm up. An invitation. A demand. "Come with me, Elian." I stared at his hand. It was large, broad-backed, powerful. Taking it would mean ending my life as I knew it. It would mean stepping out of the shadows and into the blinding, scorching sun. It would mean becoming a target for every jealous alpha and scorned omega in the school. It was suicide. "I have a shift," I stammered, clinging to the last shred of my reality. Mr. Henderson said. Dominic glanced at Mr. Henderson. The manager turned pale and practically bowed. "He's off the clock," Dominic said. "Permanently." He looked back at me. "Your shift is over. Your life as a waiter is over. Take my hand." My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I looked at the crowd, the faces of people who had ignored me for years, now twisted in shock and envy. I looked at Dominic, the cold alpha who had rejected elegance for me. And for the first time in my life, I felt a spark of something dangerous. I felt a spark of want. I reached out. My trembling fingers brushed his palm. His hand closed around mine instantly, warm and firm, an iron grip that told me he would not let go. He pulled me away from the wall. He pulled me out of the shadows. "Walk with me," he said. And God help me, I did. He led me through the crowd. He didn't rush. He walked with me at his side, his hand holding mine in a display of possession that made my knees weak. The students parted for us, their eyes wide, their whispers rising like a storm. "Why him? The scholarship kid? Is Dominic crazy? Look at his shoes, they're falling apart." I wanted to shrink. I wanted to disappear. But Dominic's grip tightened, anchoring me. He didn't look at them. He kept his eyes forward, his chin high, dragging me into his world by sheer force of will. We reached the massive double doors. The cool night air hit my face as we stepped out onto the balcony, leaving the suffocating perfume of the gala behind. But he didn't stop there. He led me down the stone steps toward a sleek black car waiting at the curb. The driver opened the door before we even reached it. "Get in," Dominic said. I hesitated. "Where are we going?" He looked at me, the streetlights reflecting in those gray eyes, making them look like pools of mercury. "To my house," he said. "We have work to do. And you need new clothes." "I can't just go to your house," I protested, panic finally finding its voice. "I don't even know you. This is insane. You can't just claim me like a stray cat." Dominic stopped. He turned to face me fully, blocking out the rest of the world. He stepped into my personal space, crowding me against the open door of the car. He lifted a hand and trapped a lock of my hair between his fingers, tugging gently. "You are not a stray cat, Elian," he murmured, his voice dropping an octave, turning rough and smoky. "You are a weapon I intend to sharpen." He leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "And I don't claim things I don't intend to keep." He pulled back, his eyes burning with a dark, terrifying intensity. Now, get in. I looked at him. I looked at the dark interior of the car. I looked back at the glowing windows of the gala hall, where my old life lay in tatters. There was no going back. The invisible boy was dead. I ducked my head and climbed into the car. End of Part 1. Part 2, The Cage of Gold and Ice. The interior of the car was a vacuum of silence, hermetically sealed against the chaos we had left behind. I sat pressed against the leather door, my waiter's uniform feeling like a costume that was rapidly shrinking. The fabric scratched at my neck, a constant reminder of who I was. Elian Thorne, the scholarship student, the cafeteria worker, the nobody. And sitting less than 2 feet away from me was Dominic Vance, the uncrowned king of St. Halloway's University, looking out the tinted window as if he hadn't just upended my entire existence. The city lights smeared into long, neon ribbons as we sped down the highway. My heart was still hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thump, 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 like a trapped bird. "Stop shaking," Dominic said. He didn't look at me. His voice was low, devoid of any obvious emotion, yet it filled the small space instantly. "I'm not shaking," I lied, my voice trembling to betray me. Dominic turned his head slowly. The passing streetlights cut across his face in rhythmic flashes. Shadow, light, shadow, light. It made his gray eyes look like shifting steel. "You are vibrating," he corrected flatly. "It's annoying. Stop it." "I can't just stop it," I snapped, the fear momentarily giving way to hysteria. You just kidnapped me. Do you realize that? You dragged me out of my job. You got me fired." "I didn't get you fired," he interrupted calmly. "I promoted you." "To what?" "Your pet." The words left my mouth before I could filter them. The air in the car changed. It grew heavier, charged with static. Dominic shifted, turning his body fully toward me. The leather of the seat creaked, a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet. He reached out, and I flinched, pressing myself harder against the door. He didn't strike me. He didn't grab me. He simply placed his hand on the seat beside my thigh, leaning in until I could smell that scent again, ozone rain, and something purely, terrifyingly masculine. "A pet implies I want you for comfort," he murmured, his eyes locking onto mine. "I don't need comfort, Elian. I need competence. I need intellect. And unlike everyone else in that ballroom, you seem to possess both, hidden under layers of cheap polyester and fear." He pulled back slightly, but his gaze remained heavy. "St. Halloway requires a partnership for the capstone project. It determines our final ranking. It determines our future placement in the hierarchy." "I know what the capstone is," I whispered. Everyone knew. It was a year-long business simulation and thesis defense that made or broke careers. But you could have picked anyone. Julianne, Marcus, anyone from the Alpha track. "They are predictable," Dominic said with a scoff. "They think inside the boxes their fathers built for them. You survive outside the box because you were never given one. That makes you dangerous. And I like dangerous things." The car slowed, turning onto a winding private road. The trees here were taller, older, their branches interlocking overhead to form a dark tunnel. We were entering the Heights, the district where the houses had names and the driveways were longer than my entire apartment building. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice small. "Now," Dominic said, checking his watch, "we eat. Then we discuss terms. Then you sleep. Tomorrow, the Real work begins." The car came to a smooth halt in front of a sprawling modern mansion. It was all glass and sharp angles, jutting out of the cliffside like a shard of obsidian. It was beautiful, but it looked cold. Unlived in. A fortress, not a home. The driver opened the door, and Dominic stepped out. I followed, my legs feeling like jelly. The night air here was thinner, sharper. Dominic didn't wait for me. He walked toward the massive front door, typing a code into a panel. The lock clicked with a heavy mechanical thud. Inside, the house was vast. The floors were polished concrete, the furniture sleek and minimal. There were no photos on the walls. No clutter. It looked like a museum exhibit titled The Life of a Sociopath. "Shoes," Dominic commanded, kicking off his own expensive loafers near the entrance. I fumbled with my worn-out work shoes, placing them next to his. The contrast was laughable. His were Italian leather. Mine were held together by hope and superglue. He led me into a kitchen that was larger than my entire dorm room. An island of black marble dominated the center. He walked to the fridge, pulled out a glass bottle of sparkling water, and drank from it directly, his throat working as he swallowed. It was such a human gesture for someone who seemed so robotic. He set the bottle down and looked at me. I was standing awkwardly by the doorway, clutching my elbows. You look ridiculous, he stated. I looked down at my oversized waiter's vest and the stain on my sleeve from where I'd bumped into the shrimp tower earlier. I know. Go upstairs. Second door on the left. There is a bathroom. Shower. Wash the smell of mediocrity off you. My bristles rose. It's the smell of hard work. Dominic stepped closer, invading my space again. He was so tall. I had to crane my neck to look him in the eye. It's the smell of submission, he corrected softly. And if you are to be my partner, you do not submit to anyone. Not even me. Unless I ask you to. My breath hitched. The double meaning hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Go, he ordered, pointing toward the stairs. I went. The bathroom was ridiculous. It had a rain shower the size of a small car and towels that were softer than any blanket I owned. I stripped off the uniform, balling it up and shoving it into the corner. I stepped under the hot water, letting it scald my skin, trying to wash away the stress of the last 3 hours. What am I doing? I thought, scrubbing my face. I should be running. I should call the police. I should. But I knew I wouldn't. Dominic was right. I was desperate. My scholarship covered tuition, but my living expenses were drowning me. If I partnered with Dominic Vance, the top alpha, I was guaranteed a win. I was guaranteed a future. I turned off the water and dried myself. It was only then that I realized I had no clothes. I cracked the bathroom door open. Dominic. No answer. I wrapped the towel around my waist, clutching it tight, and stepped into the bedroom. It was massive, dominated by a king-sized bed with gray sheets. On the bed, neatly folded, was a pile of clothes. I walked over. It wasn't my waiter uniform. It was a pair of soft gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt. They were clearly his. I put them on. The sweatpants hung low on my hips, and I had to roll the waistband twice. The shirt was enormous, the hem falling to my mid-thigh, the sleeves swallowing my hands. I felt small. Protected? No owned. I caught my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. I looked different. Without the glasses, which I had left on the sink, with damp hair falling into my eyes, and wearing the clothes of the most powerful student in the university, I didn't look like Elian the ghost. I looked like someone's secret. I made my way back downstairs. Dominic was sitting at the kitchen island. He had changed, too, into a similar set of dark loungewear. He was typing on a laptop, a pair of reading glasses perched on his nose. The sight of him, domestic, focused, made my stomach do a strange flip. There were 2 plates on the counter. Steaks, perfectly seared, with asparagus. Sit, he said without looking up. I sat. The smell of the food made my mouth water. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. Eat. I picked up the fork. Thank you. He finally looked at me. His eyes swept over his shirt on my body. His gaze lingered on the collar, where my collarbone was exposed. For a second, his typing paused. It's too big, he muttered. I'm smaller than you, I said, taking a bite of the steak. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. Clearly. He closed the laptop and pushed it aside. Let's discuss the terms. Terms. You will move in here, he said calmly, picking up his knife and fork. I choked on a piece of asparagus. What? The capstone requires constant collaboration. I do not work on campus. It's too loud. You will live here. I have a guest suite prepared. Dominic, I can't move in with you. People will talk. The rumors alone will. Let them talk, he cut in, his voice hardening. Power is not about avoiding rumors, Elian. It's about controlling them. Let them think we are sleeping together. Let them think you seduced me. It makes you look powerful. It makes you untouchable. He leaned forward, his elbows on the marble. Do you know why I chose you? Because of my GPA, I said. That was a prerequisite, not the reason. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the counter. I hesitated, then opened it. It was a printout of an old essay I had written in my freshman year. It was for a philosophy elective, The Ethics of Ruthlessness. I had argued that true leadership requires the ability to sever emotional ties for the greater good. I had gotten a C on it because the professor said it was disturbingly cold. You wrote this when you were 18, Dominic said. I read it in the archives. You understand how the world works, Elian. You understand that kindness is a currency, and like all currency, it has a limit. I stared at the paper. You've been watching me since freshman year? I notice potential, he said. You have been hiding in the shadows, afraid to show your teeth. I am giving you permission to bite. He stood up, walking around the island until he was standing behind my stool. I stiffened. He placed his hands on the counter, trapping me between his arms. He leaned down, his chin hovering just above my shoulder. I could feel the heat of his chest against my back. "Tomorrow," he whispered into my ear, "we walk into that university together. You will not wear that hoodie. You will not look at the floor. You will walk by my side, and you will look every single person who ever ignored you in the eye." My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out. The proximity was overwhelming. "And if they try to hurt me?" I whispered. "The other alphas, they won't like this." Dominic's laugh was dark, a low rumble that vibrated through my bones. "Let them try," he said. "They are wolves, Elian. But I am the hunter. And you." He turned his head, his lips brushing against my neck, sending a shiver violently down my spine. "You are the bait." He pulled away abruptly, leaving me cold and breathless. "Finish your steak," he said, walking toward the living room. "Wake up is at 6 a.m. Don't be late." I sat alone in the massive kitchen, wearing his clothes, eating his food, and feeling the terrifying weight of his attention. I was the bait. I looked out the window at the darkness pressing against the glass. I had wanted to be seen. I had wanted to matter. "Be careful what you wish for," my mother used to say. I took another bite of the steak. It tasted like victory, and it tasted like blood. End of part 2. Part 3. The Walk of Wolves. 5:58 a.m. My internal alarm clock woke me up 2 minutes before the digital one on the bedside table could scream. I lay still for a moment, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. It was high, painted a pristine clinical white. The sheets beneath me were high-thread count Egyptian cotton, cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the pilling polyester blend I had slept on for the last 3 years in my dorm. For a split second, I thought it was a dream. Then I turned my head and saw the pile of clothes I had worn yesterday. The oversized waiter's vest, the stained white shirt, heaped in the corner like a discarded skin. Memory crashed over me like a tidal wave. Dominic Vance. The gala. The car. The bait. I threw the covers off. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I couldn't be late. Dominic Vance struck me as the kind of person who would leave me stranded on the highway if I was 30 seconds behind schedule. I scrambled out of bed, showered in record time, and stepped out into the bedroom. On the sleek black dresser, a new stack of clothes was waiting. There was a note on top, written in sharp, angular handwriting. "Burn the other ones." I picked up the clothes. A white button-down shirt, crisp and heavy. Black trousers that looked like they cost more than my tuition. A charcoal gray cashmere sweater. I put them on. The fit was terrifyingly perfect. The trousers hugged my waist without needing a belt. The shirt cuffs hit exactly at my wrists. I looked in the mirror. The boy staring back wasn't Elian the ghost anymore. He looked sharper. Harder. Expensive. I went downstairs. Dominic was in the kitchen, leaning against the marble island, sipping an espresso. He was dressed in a black turtleneck and a long camel coat, looking like he had just stepped out of a magazine editorial about most eligible billionaires. He didn't look up as I entered. 6:03 a.m. "You're late." I was adjusting everything, I muttered, gesturing to the clothes. "How did you know my size?" He finally looked at me. His gray eyes swept over my form, lingering on the way the sweater clung to my frame. A flicker of satisfaction crossed his face, there and gone in an instant. "I told you," he said, setting his cup down. "I do my research, and I have a good eye for dimensions." He pushed a travel mug toward me. "Drink. It's black coffee. No sugar. Sugar makes you sluggish." I took the mug. It was hot, grounding. "Are we really doing this? Walking into campus together?" "We are." He grabbed his keys. "And you will not walk behind me, Elian. You will walk beside me. If you falter, they will eat you alive. If you look down, they will think you are weak. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said, though my stomach was doing backflips. "Good. Let's go hunting." The drive to St. Halloway's was shorter than I wanted it to be. The closer we got to the university gates, the tighter my chest felt. The campus was already buzzing. It was the morning after the Ascension Gala. The gossip mill would be running at nuclear capacity. Everyone would be talking about who partnered with whom, who got rejected, and most importantly, who Dominic Vance had chosen. When the black sedan pulled up to the main administrative building, the atmosphere changed instantly. Students who were milling about on the lawn stopped. Heads turned. Phones were raised. "Ready?" Dominic asked. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the crowd with that same bored, predatory expression he always wore. "No," I admitted. "Lie better," he said. He opened his door. I opened mine. We stepped out into the crisp morning air simultaneously. The silence was immediate and absolute. It was as if someone had pressed the mute button on the entire world. Hundreds of eyes locked onto us. Dominic rounded the car. He didn't wait. He didn't hesitate. He walked toward me, and for a terrifying second, I thought he was going to kiss me. Instead, he reached out and adjusted the collar of my coat, his fingers brushing the skin of my neck. It was a possessive gesture. A claim. "Chin up," he whispered, his voice low and rough. "Show them your teeth." He turned, and we began to walk. The crowd parted. It was exactly like the night before, but in the daylight, it felt more visceral. I could see their faces clearly now. The confusion, the jealousy, the shock. Is that the scholarship kid, Elian? The one who works in the library? Look at his clothes. Is he wearing Vance Couture? Why is Dominic touching him? I felt like an imposter. I wanted to hunch my shoulders, to make myself small. But then I felt Dominic's presence beside me, a wall of solid, unyielding ice. He wasn't looking at them. He was walking with a rhythmic, powerful stride, and I found myself matching it. Left, right, left, right. We were halfway to the building entrance when a figure stepped into our path. It was Julianne. The senator's son looked perfect, as always. His blonde hair was coiffed, his uniform impeccable. But his eyes were red-rimmed, and his mouth was twisted in a sneer that ruined his beautiful face. He blocked our way, flanked by two other AlphaTrack students, Marcus and a guy named Trent. "So it's true," Julian spat, his voice trembling with rage. I thought it was a joke. A sick prank to humiliate me. Dominic stopped. I stopped beside him. "Move, Julianne," Dominic said calmly. "You're blocking the sunlight." "You rejected me," Julian said, his voice rising hysterically. "Me? For him? For this charity case?" He pointed a manicured finger at me. "Look at him, Dominic. He's wearing your clothes because he can't afford his own. He's a leech. A nobody. What did he do? Did he beg? Did he?" "Careful," Dominic warned. The temperature seemed to drop. "You are bordering on slander." "I'm speaking the truth." Julianne took a step toward me. "How much did you pay him, Elian? Or did you just offer him the only thing you have, your body? Because we all know you don't have the brains to sit at the high table." The insult hung in the air. The crowd gasped. Dominic's jaw tightened. I saw his hand twitch, curling into a fist. He was about to step forward. He was about to defend me. No. I remembered what he said in the kitchen. "I notice potential. I am giving you permission to bite. If I let Dominic fight my battles now, I would be his pet forever. I would be the damsel in this twisted narrative." I stepped forward, cutting Dominic off. I looked Julian dead in the eye. My heart was hammering, but my voice, when it came out, was surprisingly steady. "You're right, Julianne," I said. Julianne blinked, surprised by my admission. "Excuse me. I am a charity case," I continued, adjusting my glasses. "I'm here on a full academic scholarship because I scored in the top 0.1% of the National Aptitude Test. You're here because your father donated a new wing to the library." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Julianne's face turned pink. "How dare you? And as for the brains to sit at the high table," I interrupted, stepping closer until I was toe-to-toe with him. "My GPA is a 4.0. Yours is a 3.2. I checked the public rankings this morning. If this partnership was based on merit, Dominic would be dragging you down." I tilted my head, channeling every ounce of coldness I had seen in Dominic. "So please, step aside. We have a capstone to win, and you're wasting my time." Silence. Complete, stunned silence. Julianne's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He looked at Dominic, then back at me, realizing for the first time that the mouse had claws. Dominic didn't say a word. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw the corner of his lip twitch upward. "You heard him," Dominic said, his voice laced with dark amusement. "Move." Julian faltered. His confidence shattered. He stepped aside, his friends shuffling awkwardly behind him. We walked past them. As we entered the cool shade of the building, away from the prying eyes, Dominic didn't stop, but he leaned in close to me. "That," he murmured, his voice sending a shiver down my spine, "was adequate." "Adequate?" I let out a breath, my adrenaline crashing. I thought I was going to throw up. "You didn't. You stood your ground. You humiliated the senator's son with simple arithmetic. It was—" He paused, searching for the word. "Arousing." I tripped over my own feet. "What?" Dominic caught my elbow, steadying me instantly. His grip was firm, his fingers digging into the muscle through the cashmere. "Don't trip now, Elian. We're just getting started." He led me down the hallway toward the lecture hall 1, the domain of the final year capstone class. We pushed through the double doors. The room was already full. The professor, Dr. Eris, was at the podium. Every seat was taken, except for the front row, the row reserved for the top-ranking teams. Dominic walked to the center desk in the front row. He pulled out a chair. He didn't sit in it. He held it out. For me. The room went quiet again. The alphas usually sat while their partners scrambled for seats. Dominic was flipping the script. He was serving me. Sit, he commanded softly. I sat. He pushed the chair in, then took the seat next to me. He leaned back, spreading his legs slightly, occupying his space and half of mine. He placed his arm on the back of my chair, effectively boxing me in. Dr. Eris cleared his throat. Mr. Vance. Mr. Thorne. I see the rumors are true. An unconventional pairing. Innovative, Professor, Dominic corrected lazily. Not unconventional. I'm simply investing in the highest yield asset in the room. He turned his head to look at me, ignoring the rest of the class. His eyes were dark, intense, and focused solely on my mouth. Open your notebook, Elian, he whispered. Show them why I chose you. I opened my notebook, my hand shaking slightly. I felt the weight of his arm behind me, the heat of his leg pressing against mine under the table. I was the bait. I was the weapon. And for the first time, I realized that Dominic Vance didn't just want a partner to win a project. He was building a king to sit beside him. And he wasn't going to let anyone else touch the crown. End of Part 3. Part 4. The Art of War. The silence in Lecture Hall 1 was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a battlefield right before the first arrow is loosed. Dr. Eris stood at the podium, clicking a remote. The massive screen behind him flickered to life, displaying a complex web of stock market trends, corporate hierarchies, and legal loopholes. The capstone is not just a thesis, Dr. Eris announced, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. It is a war game. For the next 6 months, each partnership will represent a fictional conglomerate. Your goal is simple: hostile takeover. You must acquire, dismantle, or merge with your competitors using any legal and semi-legal means necessary. He paused, his eyes scanning the room, landing inevitably on the front row. On us, Mr. Vance and Mr. Thorne. Since you have disrupted the status quo so vividly, you will be assigned the failing legacy portfolio. Your company is bankrupt, under investigation, and bleeding talent. Your goal is to survive. A ripple of snickers went through the room. Julianne, sitting 2 rows back, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Fitting. Trash managing trash. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but before I could react, Dominic shifted beside me. He didn't turn around. He didn't acknowledge the taunt. He simply opened his laptop, the expensive metal gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Elian, he said, his voice a low rumble that only I could hear. Don't look at them. Look at the data. I forced my eyes to the screen. The numbers were abysmal. The company we were assigned, Titan Industries, was a sinking ship. Debt-to-equity ratio was 4-to-1. Stock price was in freefall. It's impossible, I whispered, panic clawing at my throat. Dr. Eris set us up to fail. We can't salvage this. We need a miracle. Dominic leaned in, his shoulder pressing against mine. The contact was grounding, a solid anchor in the storm of my anxiety. We don't need a miracle, he murmured, his breath ghosting against my ear. We need a scalpel. You know the tax codes better than anyone in this room. Find the loophole. But, find it. His belief in me was irrational. It was terrifying. And it was electric. I took a deep breath, adjusting my glasses, the only part of my old self I had kept. I blocked out the whispers. I blocked out Julianne's smug face. I dove into the numbers. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The rest of the class was busy posturing, forming alliances, and trading insults. Dominic sat silently, watching me. He wasn't working on the simulation. He was guarding me. His presence was a physical shield, deflecting the hostility of the room. Then I saw it. It was buried in the footnotes of the fictional company's quarterly report. A subsidiary asset, a patent for a biotech filtration system that had been misfiled under janitorial expenses. Dominic, I said, my voice trembling with excitement. Tell me. They undervalued the assets, I said, pointing at the screen. Look, if we liquidate the real estate holdings in the 3rd quarter and reinvest in this subsidiary, we trigger a tax write-off that cancels the debt. It's a Phoenix strategy. Dominic looked at the screen. He scanned the data in seconds. Slowly, a smile spread across his face. It wasn't the cruel, bored smile I was used to. It was genuine. It was dangerous. Brilliant, he whispered. He turned to me, and for a second, the world narrowed down to just his gray eyes. "Dr. Eris," Dominic called out, not raising his voice but commanding the room instantly. The professor looked up. "Yes, Mr. Vance? Ready to forfeit." "We're ready to acquire," Dominic said lazily. "We just liquidated our debt and acquired Julianne's parent company via a leveraged buyout of their supplier." The room froze. "That's impossible," Julian screeched, standing up. "You can't do that in 30 minutes. Elian did it in 20, Dominic corrected. He reached out and placed his hand over mine on the table. His fingers interlaced with mine, squeezing tight. It was a victory lap, a public declaration. "Check the board, Professor." Dr. Eris typed furiously. The main screen refreshed. The red lines of our company turned green. Julianne's company status flashed. Hostile takeover imminent. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Dominic leaned back, looking at Julianne with cold satisfaction. "You were saying something about trash?" I felt a rush of adrenaline, so potent it made me dizzy. I had done that. Me. Elian the ghost. And Dominic. He looked at me like I was the most valuable thing in the room. The rest of the day was a blur of stares and whispers, but they felt different now. Less mocking, more fearful. By the time late afternoon hit, the adrenaline had faded, leaving me exhausted. My brain felt like mush. "Library," Dominic announced as we left the lecture hall. "Dominic, please," I groaned. "I need coffee. I need sleep. I can't look at another spreadsheet." "The private study room's in the West Wing," he continued, ignoring my plea. "They have a couch. You can sleep. I have to finish the merger paperwork for the simulation." We walked to the library. The West Wing was reserved for graduate students and high-ranking alphas. It smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and money. Dominic swiped his ID card, and we entered a private room that looked more like a lawyer's office than a study space. Mahogany table, leather chairs, and a velvet sofa in the corner. I collapsed onto the sofa, dropping my bag. "Wake me up in a year." Dominic chuckled, a rare, low sound. He sat at the desk, opening his laptop. 20 minutes, Elian. Then we review the strategy for tomorrow." I closed my eyes. I drifted into a half-sleep, the sound of Dominic's typing acting as a rhythmic lullaby. I don't know how much time passed, but I woke up to the feeling of something warm brushing against my forehead. I blinked open my eyes. Dominic was standing over me. He had taken off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms that were surprisingly muscular. He was leaning down, his hand frozen in midair near my face. "You were frowning in your sleep," he said quietly. "Was I?" My voice was thick with sleep. "Yes. You worry too much." His hand moved, and his thumb brushed the space between my eyebrows, smoothing out the tension. His skin was warm, rough calluses against my softness. My heart hammered against my ribs. He was so close. I could smell the coffee on his breath, the distinct scent of rain and ozone that clung to him. "Why are you doing this, Dominic?" I whispered. "The clothes. The defense. The this." Dominic's eyes darkened. He didn't pull away. "I told you. You are my partner. Partners don't look at each other like this," I breathed. "Like what?" Like you're hungry." Dominic's gaze dropped to my lips. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with static electricity. "I am always hungry, Elian," he murmured. "That is the nature of an alpha. We want. We take. We consume." He leaned closer. I stopped breathing. "But with you." He hesitated, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "With you, I find myself wanting to keep, to hoard. It is a new sensation. I don't like it." "Then stop," I whispered, though I didn't mean it. "I can't." He lowered his head. His lips were inches from mine. I could feel the heat radiating from him. I closed my eyes, tilting my chin up, surrendering to the inevitable gravity of him. Creak. The heavy oak door of the study room groaned open. Dominic pulled back instantly, his mask of indifference slamming back into place faster than a shutter. I sat up, disoriented, my face burning. It wasn't a librarian. It was Marcus, Julianne's friend. And he wasn't alone. 2 seniors from the wrestling team were behind him, blocking the exit. "Well, well," Marcus sneered, stepping into the room. "Cozy." Dominic stood up. He didn't look flustered. He looked bored, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there a moment ago. "Get out," Dominic said flatly. "Or what?" Marcus laughed. "You going to buy my dad's company too? You think you're untouchable, Vance? You think you can just drag your little pet in here and humiliate Julianne without consequences?" "I think you are trespassing," Dominic said, taking a step forward. "And I think you are about 5 seconds away from an expulsion hearing." We're just here to talk to Elian, Marcus said, his eyes sliding to me. There was something in his gaze that made my blood run cold. Malice. Pure, unadulterated malice. We just want to know what makes him so special. Is it the mouth? It must be the mouth. I flinched. The crudeness of the insult was like a slap. Dominic moved. It happened so fast I almost missed it. One moment Dominic was standing by the desk. The next he was in front of Marcus, his hand wrapped around the other boy's throat. He slammed Marcus against the bookshelves. Books tumbled to the floor with a crash. Dominic, I shouted, scrambling off the sofa. The two wrestling guys stepped forward, but Dominic didn't even look at them. He was staring into Marcus's eyes, his expression terrifyingly blank. Repeat that, Dominic whispered. I dare you. Marcus gagged, clawing at Dominic's hand. Let go. You speak of him again, Dominic said, his voice a low hiss. You look at him again, and I will ensure that not only do you never graduate, but you never work in this city. I will bury you under so much litigation your grandchildren will be paying the legal fees. He tightened his grip. Marcus's face was turning purple. Dominic, stop. I grabbed Dominic's arm. You're going to kill him. He's not worth it. Dominic froze. He looked down at my hand on his arm. He looked at my face, saw the fear in my eyes. Slowly, reluctantly, he released his grip. Marcus slumped to the floor, gasping for air, clutching his throat. Get out, Dominic said. Before I change my mind. Marcus scrambled up, stumbling toward the door. The wrestling guys looked at Dominic, then at each other, and wisely decided to retreat. They dragged Marcus out and slammed the door behind them. The silence that followed was deafening. Dominic stood facing the bookshelves, his chest heaving slightly. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. I stood there, trembling. I had never seen violence like that. I had never seen anyone defend me like that. Dominic, I whispered. He turned. The coldness was gone. In its place was a raw, chaotic storm. Are you hurt? He demanded. He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, grabbing my shoulders. His eyes scanned my face, my neck, my arms. Did they touch you? Did they say anything else? I'm fine, I said, though my legs felt weak. You choked him. He insulted you. People insult me all the time, Dominic. You can't just strangle everyone who makes a mean comment. I can, he growled. And I will. He pulled me into him. It wasn't a gentle hug. It was a desperate collision. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. His arms wrapped around my waist, crushing me against him. I didn't account for this, he mumbled against my skin. For what? The rage, he admitted. I am calculated. I am cold. That is what I am. But when he looked at you, I wanted to tear the world apart. He pulled back, his hands cupping my face. Elian, you have to understand. You aren't just a partner anymore. You are mine, and I protect what is mine. I looked at him, this powerful, terrifying, broken boy who had everything but understood nothing about the heart. And I realized I was in trouble. Deep, irreversible trouble. Because I didn't want him to let go. We need to leave, he said abruptly, pulling away. It's not safe here. Julianne is escalating. If Marcus was brave enough to corner us, they are planning something bigger. Bigger. The Winter Gala is in 2 weeks, Dominic said, grabbing his coat. The midterm evaluation. They will try to destroy our reputation before then. He threw my coat at me. Let them try, I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. Dominic paused. He looked at me, and a slow, dark smirk curved his lips. That's it, he said softly. Show me your teeth. End of Part 4. Part 5. The silence before the snow. The drive back to the mansion was a blur of speed and silence. Dominic drove like he was trying to outrun his own shadow, one hand gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white, the other resting on the center console, dangerously close to my knee. I watched the city lights dissolve into the darkness of the private roads. The adrenaline from the library confrontation was fading, leaving behind a cold, sticky residue of fear. Not of Dominic, never of Dominic anymore, but for him. You can't just attack people, I said quietly, breaking the silence. Dominic didn't look at me. His jaw was set in a hard line. I didn't attack him. I corrected him. You choked him, Dominic. He threatened you. He's an idiot. Marcus is all bark and no bite. And I am all bite, Dominic said, swerving the car smoothly around a sharp curve. You need to understand something, Elian. In my world, weakness is a scent. If they smell it on you, they hunt you. If they smell it on me, they destroy everything I have built. He pulled into the driveway. The massive gates swung open. I will not let them destroy you, he finished, his voice dropping to a whisper. We entered the house. It felt different now. When I first arrived, it had felt like a museum, cold, sterile, imposing. Now it felt like a bunker. A sanctuary. Go to the study, Dominic ordered, tossing his keys into a bowl. We have work to do. The gala is in 10 days. We need to bulletproof the presentation. Dominic, it's midnight. We need sleep. Sleep is for people who aren't being hunted, he muttered, walking toward the kitchen to start the espresso machine. I sighed and went to the study. The next week was a grueling marathon of caffeine, spreadsheets, and tension. We fell into a rhythm, a strange, intoxicating domesticity that felt more intimate than any relationship I had ever had. We woke up at 5 a.m. We ran through the estate grounds, Dominic sprinting ahead, me trailing behind, gasping for air but refusing to stop. We ate breakfast in silence, reading global market reports. We went to class, ignoring the stares and the whispers that seemed to grow louder every day. And at night we worked. We dissected the Titan Industries simulation until my eyes burned. We found every legal loophole, every tax exemption, every hidden asset. We built a conglomerate out of ashes. It was Wednesday night, 3 days before the gala, when the dynamic shifted. We were in the study. Papers were strewn everywhere. I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by printed charts, while Dominic paced back and forth, dictating a speech for the defense portion of the capstone. The acquisition of the biotech firm was not hostile, Dominic recited, his voice rhythmic and hypnotic. It was a necessary stabilization of a volatile market asset. We didn't destroy the company, we saved it from its own incompetence. He stopped pacing. He looked down at me. Read that back to me. I picked up the paper. The acquisition of the biotech firm. I trailed off. I was looking at a discrepancy in the footer of the document. Elian, wait, I whispered. Dominic, look at this. He knelt beside me instantly, his shoulder brushing mine. What is it? The timestamp, I said, pointing to the code at the bottom of the page. This report was generated at 3 a.m. yesterday, but I didn't print it until 7 a.m. Dominic's eyes narrowed. He snatched the paper from my hand. He scanned it, then moved to his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Someone accessed the server, he said, his voice turning to ice. Remote login. Bypass proxy. Who? Take a wild guess. Julianne, I breathed. He's trying to steal our data? Worse, Dominic said, staring at the screen. He didn't steal it. He changed it. He turned the laptop toward me. The projection for our third quarter earnings, the cornerstone of our entire strategy, had been altered. A single decimal point moved 2 spaces to the left. It looks like a clerical error, I said, horror washing over me. If we present this, if we go on stage and project these numbers, we would look like amateurs, Dominic finished. We would be laughed out of the program. Our valuation would tank. We would fail. I felt sick. He planted a logic bomb. It's subtle. If I hadn't checked the timestamp. But you did. Dominic turned to me. His expression was intense, his pupils blown wide. You found it. You saved us. We have to fix it, I said, reaching for the keyboard. We have to scrub the code and reset the algorithm. No, Dominic said. He caught my wrist. His grip was warm, grounding. What do you mean, no? We have 2 days. If we fix it now, he'll know we found it, Dominic said, a dark smile playing on his lips. He'll try something else. Something we might miss. So what do? We let him think he won, Dominic whispered. We leave the error in the main file. And we build a shadow drive. A secondary presentation that we swap in at the last second. He leaned closer, until his forehead was resting against mine. We are going to walk into that gala, Elian. We are going to let Julian smirk. We are going to let him think he has destroyed us. And then, he pulled back, his eyes gleaming with a terrifying brilliance. We are going to bury him. The night before the gala, the snow started falling. It covered the estate in a blanket of white silence. Inside, the house was warm, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. We had finished the shadow drive. The trap was set. Now, there was nothing left to do but wait. I was in my room, the guest room, packing my bag for the next day. My suit, a midnight blue velvet tuxedo that Dominic had custom-ordered for me, hung on the door. It was beautiful. It was armor. A knock on the door. Come in. Dominic entered. He wasn't wearing his usual armor of suits and coats. He was wearing a simple white t-shirt and gray sweatpants. His hair was messy. He looked young. And tired. I can't sleep, he admitted. Me neither, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. I keep running the numbers in my head. What if the swap fails? What if the projector jams? It won't. He walked over to the window, staring out at the snow. But that's not why I can't sleep. Why then? He turned. Because tomorrow, everything changes. After tomorrow, everyone will know who you are. The ghost will be gone. You will be a target, Elian. A permanent one. I can handle it, I said, standing up. I've handled worse. Poverty is a pretty good teacher of resilience. Dominic looked at me with a strange sadness. I know, but I don't want you to have to handle it. I want to put you in a glass case and lock the door. He took a step toward me. Is that weird? He asked. Possessiveness. A little, I smiled weakly. But I think I like it. He closed the distance between us. He reached out and took my hand, lacing our fingers together. Stay with me tonight, he said. My heart skipped a beat. Dominic. Not for that, he clarified quickly, though his cheeks flushed slightly. Just stay. I don't want to be alone. And I don't want you to be alone. I looked at him. The cold alpha. The king of St. Halloway. He was asking, no begging, for connection. Okay, I whispered. We went to his room. The master suite. It was vast and dark, the only light coming from the snow-reflected moon outside. We lay down on the massive bed, on top of the covers, fully clothed. There was a foot of space between us. For a long time, we just lay there, listening to the wind howl outside. My father, Dominic said into the darkness. He used to make me recite the stock exchange closing numbers before dinner. If I got one wrong, I didn't eat. I turned my head to look at his profile. Dominic. He told me that affection is a liability. That love is a leverage point for your enemies. He turned his head, his eyes meeting mine in the dark. He was right. Why? Because, Dominic whispered, reaching out to touch my cheek. If anyone hurts you now, Elian, I will burn this entire city to the ground. And that makes me vulnerable. No, I said, covering his hand with mine. It makes you human. He shifted, moving closer until our bodies were touching. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me into his chest. I could hear his heartbeat, steady, strong, rhythmic. Sleep, he commanded softly. I'll watch. And for the first time in years, I felt completely safe. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me, anchored by the weight of the Alpha who had chosen me against the world. The Winter Gala was a spectacle of excess. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Ice sculptures, white roses, crystal chandeliers. The air smelled of expensive perfume and nervous sweat. The entire university was there. The board of directors, the alumni association, the press. Dominic and I stood at the entrance. I smoothed the velvet of my tuxedo. I felt like an imposter again, for just a second. Then I felt Dominic's hand on the small of my back. Head up, he murmured. Shoulders back. You are Elian Thorne. You are the architect of this victory. We walked in. The room quieted. All eyes turned to us. We were a striking pair, Dominic in stark black, me in deep midnight blue. We moved through the crowd like sharks cutting through water. I saw Julian across the room. He was wearing silver, surrounded by his sycophants. When he saw us, he smiled. It was a nasty, triumphant smile. He raised his glass in a mock toast. Enjoy it while it lasts, I thought. Mr. Vance, Mr. Thorne, Dr. Eris announced from the stage. Please take the podium. You have 20 minutes to present your strategy for Titan Industries. Dominic squeezed my shoulder once. Showtime. We walked up the stairs to the stage. The lights were blinding. I couldn't see the audience, just a sea of darkness beyond the glare. Dominic took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, tonight, we will show you how to turn a failing legacy into a future empire. He nodded to me. I stepped up to the laptop connected to the massive projector screen. This was it, the moment of truth. I plugged in our drive. Not the shadow drive, the original one, the infected one. Dominic's plan was risky. We had to let the error show first. We had to let Julian think he had won, just for a second, to bait him into revealing himself. I clicked open. The presentation loaded. The first slide appeared, Titan Industries, Q3 projected earnings. And there it was. The error. The red line plummeting off the chart. A gasp went through the room. What is this? Dr. Eris asked, stepping forward. Mr. Vance, your projections show a 90% loss. This is bankruptcy. Is it? Dominic asked calmly. It's incompetence. Julian's voice rang out from the front row. He stood up, looking delighted. They didn't check their algorithms. They're frauds. The murmurs grew to a roar. The board members were frowning. I looked at Dominic. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at Julianne. "Wait," I said into my microphone. My voice echoed, cutting through the noise. I hit a key. Control plus Alt plus Z. The screen flickered. The red line vanished. In its place, a new graphic appeared. It wasn't a chart. It was a log file. User, J_Senator_Son_001 access time. 3 a.m. action. Modify_cell B45 IP address. ST_Halloway_Dorm_Alpha_Wing. The silence that fell over the room was instant and terrifying. Julianne's smile vanished. His face went white. "Whatever are you talking about, Julianne?" Dominic asked, his voice smooth as silk but sharp as a razor. "We didn't check our algorithms. Or did you check them for us?" Dominic stepped forward to the edge of the stage, looming over the audience. "This is not just a presentation about Titan Industries," he declared. "This is a lesson in corporate espionage. We anticipated a hostile attack. We allowed the attacker to enter. And we traced the source." He pointed a finger at Julianne. "Board members, I move that the opposing team be disqualified for violation of the ethics code. And I move that Titan Industries be declared the victor." I swapped the drive. I clicked the button. The real presentation appeared. Green lines. Massive profits. A perfect, untouchable strategy. The room erupted. Not in whispers, but in applause. Shocked, awed applause. Dominic turned to me. The lights reflected in his eyes, making them shine like stars. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He reached out and took my hand, right there on stage, in front of the entire world. He lifted my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles. "Checkmate," he whispered against my skin. I looked out at the crowd. I saw Julian being escorted out by security. I saw the board members nodding in approval. We had won. But as I looked at Dominic, at the fierce pride in his eyes, I realized the game wasn't over. Because in the shadows at the back of the room, a man was watching us. A man in a gray suit who looked exactly like an older, colder version of Dominic. Dominic's father. And he didn't look impressed. He looked hungry. Dominic followed my gaze. His body went rigid. His grip on my hand tightened until it hurt. "Elian," he whispered, his voice trembling for the first time since I'd met him. "Don't look at him." "Who is it?" "The real monster," Dominic said. "Run." End of Part 6, The King's Gambit. The applause was a physical weight, pressing against my eardrums, a roar of approval from 500 of the city's most powerful people. But to me, it sounded like static. "Run," Dominic had whispered. But we couldn't run. We were on a stage, bathed in blinding white spotlights, the centerpiece of the Winter Gala. Running now would be social suicide. It would be an admission of guilt, of fear. I squeezed Dominic's hand, my fingernails digging into his palm. His skin was cold, unnaturally so. The cold alpha was freezing over, retreating into the fortress of his mind where he had survived his childhood. "Dominic," I said, my voice barely audible over the clapping. I didn't look at the back of the room where his father stood. I looked at him. "Stay with me. Don't go to that place." He blinked, the glaze over his gray eyes fracturing slightly. He looked down at me. "He's here," Dominic murmured, his voice hollow. "He wasn't supposed to come. He never comes to the midterms." "It doesn't matter," I said, forcing a steel into my voice that I didn't feel. "We won. We just humiliated his biggest rival's son. We secured the board's favor. We are untouchable right now." "No one is untouchable to Silas Vance," Dominic replied. Dr. Eris was bustling toward us, a wide, sycophantic smile plastered on his face. "Brilliant. Simply brilliant. Mr. Vance, Mr. Thorne, that was the most ruthless display of corporate defense I have seen in 20 years. The board is demanding a reception line." "We need to leave," Dominic said abruptly, turning away from the professor. "But the chairman wants to." I said we are leaving. Dominic grabbed my arm, his grip bruising, and practically dragged me down the stage stairs. We didn't head for the main exit where the photographers were flashing their bulbs like lightning storms. We headed for the service exit, the narrow corridor used by the catering staff. We pushed through the heavy velvet curtains and spilled into the hallway. It was quiet here, the roar of the party muffled by thick walls. The air smelled of sanitizer and old mop water, a stark contrast to the expensive perfumes inside. "Okay," I breathed, leaning against the concrete wall. "We're out. Let's get to the car." Too late. Dominic's voice was a dead thing. I looked up. Standing at the end of the hallway, blocking the exit to the parking lot, was a figure. He was tall, broader than Dominic, wearing a suit that cost more than the building we were standing in. His hair was silver, swept back severely. His face was a map of hard lines and cruel angles. But it was the eyes that stopped my heart. They were Dominic's eyes, gray, piercing, intelligent, but devoid of any humanity. Silas Vance. He didn't move. He just stood there, hands clasped behind his back, waiting. Dominic stiffened beside me. I could feel the tremors running through his body, vibrating into mine. This wasn't just fear. This was conditioning. This was a lifetime of psychological warfare manifesting in a single moment. "Father," Dominic said. It wasn't a greeting. It was a surrender. Silas walked forward. His steps were slow, deliberate, the sound of his shoes echoing on the linoleum like gunshots. "Dominic," Silas said. His voice was smooth, deep, and terrifyingly calm. "That was a messy performance." "We won," Dominic said, though he didn't make eye contact. He looked at his father's tie knot. "You won," Silas corrected, "because your opponent was an incompetent child. You relied on a logic bomb. You relied on luck. A true Vance does not rely on luck. He relies on domination." Silas stopped 3 feet away from us. The air in the hallway seemed to drop 20 degrees. Finally, Silas turned his eyes to me. I felt like a bug pinned under a microscope. He didn't look at me with hate. He didn't look at me with disgust. He looked at me with nothing. I was a variable in an equation he was trying to balance. "And this," Silas said, gesturing vaguely at me, "is the distraction." "He is my partner," Dominic said. "He is a waiter," Silas countered dryly. I read his file. Elian Thorne. Scholarship student. Deceased parents. No assets. No connections. A parasite attached to a host. "I am not a parasite," I said. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Silas blinked. He looked at me again, this time with a flicker of interest. "Speak when you are spoken to, boy," Silas said. "I am speaking," I said, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. I stepped out from behind Dominic. "And you are wrong. I'm not a distraction. I'm the reason your stock price just jumped 4% in the last 20 minutes. Silas raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Dominic had the strategy," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "But I found the loophole. I found the tax exemption. And I found the timestamp on Julianne's hack. Without me, Dominic would have walked into that trap. So, respectfully, Mr. Vance, I am not a liability. I am the highest yield asset in this partnership." Silence stretched between us. Dominic was staring at me in horror. No one spoke to Silas Vance like that. Silas studied me for a long moment. Then a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "He has teeth," Silas mused. He looked back at Dominic. "A pity." "Why?" Dominic asked hoarsely. "Because," Silas sighed, adjusting his cufflinks. "Attachments make you weak, Dominic. You know this. You performed well tonight, but I saw the way you looked at him on that stage. You held his hand. You hesitated." Silas took a step closer to Dominic, invading his personal space. "You are my heir. You are the future of Vance Global. You cannot afford a weakness. And Silas pointed a finger at my chest without touching me. "He is a massive, glowing target. If you keep him, everyone will use him to get to you. They will hurt him. They will break him. And in doing so, they will break you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. "So let's solve the problem," Silas said, clicking a gold pen. He wrote a number and tore the check out. He held it out to me. $1 million, Silas said. "Tuition paid. An apartment in New York. A job at any firm you want, as long as it isn't mine." I looked at the check. It was more money than I would make in 10 years. "Take it," Silas commanded. "Leave the city tonight. Never speak to my son again." Dominic didn't move. He was frozen, his eyes fixed on the check. He was waiting. He was waiting to see if I would take it. He expected me to take it. Why wouldn't I? I was poor. I was struggling. This was the golden ticket. I reached out. I took the check from Silas's fingers. Dominic let out a small, broken sound, like a wounded animal. I looked at the check. I looked at the zeros. Then slowly, deliberately, I tore it in half. Then in quarters. I let the pieces flutter to the floor like confetti. "I think you misunderstood the valuation," I said, meeting Silas's gaze head-on. "Dominic isn't for sale. And neither am I." Silas's face hardened. The amusement was gone. Now there was only cold rage. "You are making a mistake," Silas whispered. "I can ruin you. I can make sure you never work a day in your life. I can erase you." "Try," I said. Silas stepped forward, his hand raising as if to strike. Wham! Dominic moved. He stepped between us, his chest colliding with his father's. He caught Silas's wrist in midair. The hallway went deadly silent. Dominic was shaking. He was terrified, but he was there. He was holding his father's arm, his grip iron tight. "Don't," Dominic snarled. It was a sound I had never heard from him. It was guttural, primal. "Don't you dare touch him." Silas looked at his son's hand on his wrist. He looked at the fire in Dominic's eyes. For the first time, the father looked surprised. "You defy me?" Silas asked quietly. "For this." "For him," Dominic corrected. "You told me to find a partner, father. You told me to find someone who challenges me. Someone who isn't afraid." Dominic shoved his father's hand away. "I found him, and if you try to ruin him, I will burn Vance Global to the ground myself. I know where the bodies are buried, Silas. I know the offshore accounts. I know the shell companies. Do not test me." Silas stared at his son. He searched for the fear, the submission. But it wasn't there. In its place was something new. Something Silas had inadvertently created. A king. Silas slowly lowered his hand. He straightened his jacket. He looked at me, then at Dominic. A strange expression crossed his face. Not pride, exactly, but respect. The respect a predator has for another predator. "Very well," Silas said coldly. "You have made your choice." He stepped back. "But remember this, Dominic. The crown is heavy. And now that you have a queen," he glanced at me, "you have something to lose. Watch your back." Silas turned on his heel and walked away. He didn't look back. We watched him disappear down the hallway, the sound of his footsteps fading into the distance. The second he was gone, Dominic collapsed. His knees gave out. I caught him, wrapping my arms around his waist, lowering us both to the floor. We sat there on the cold linoleum, tangled together in our expensive suits. Dominic was gasping for air, his face buried in my shoulder. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. "I did it," he choked out. I stood up to him. "You did," I whispered, stroking his hair. "You were amazing. You were perfect. I thought." He pulled back, his eyes searching mine. "When you took the check, I thought you were leaving." "I'm never leaving," I said fiercely. "You chose me, Dominic. You pulled me out of the shadows. You're stuck with me." He looked at me with such raw, unguarded intensity that I felt my breath hitch. "I don't just want you for the capstone," he whispered. "I don't just want you for the business. I know. I love you," he said. The words hung in the air, simple and absolute. "I love you too," I said. Dominic leaned in. This time, there was no hesitation. No crowd. No cameras. Just us. He kissed me. It wasn't like the gentle touches before. It was desperate. It was acclaiming. It tasted of fear and relief and victory. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. I kissed him back with everything I had, pouring all the adrenaline and love of the last few weeks into the contact. We were a mess. We were exhausted. We were targets. But as we sat there in the hallway, holding onto each other like lifelines, I knew one thing for sure. We had won. Epilogue, 6 months later. The spring sun was shining on the campus of St. Halloway's. The cherry blossoms were in bloom, painting the world in shades of pink and white. I sat on the stone bench near the fountain, a book open on my lap. But I wasn't reading. I was watching. Dominic was walking across the quad. He looked different now. The tension that used to carry in his shoulders was gone. He walked with an easy confidence, his tie loosened, his jacket slung over one shoulder. People still stared. They always would. He was Dominic Vance, the heir, the genius, the cold alpha. But when he saw me, the coldness vanished. A smile, real, bright, and blinding, broke across his face. He changed his trajectory, ignoring the group of students trying to get his attention, and walked straight to me. "Ready to go?" he asked, stopping in front of the bench. "Depends," I said, closing my book. "Did you finish the merger proposal?" "Done," he said. "And I fired the marketing team." "Dominic, they were incompetent," he shrugged. "Besides, I want to hire you." "I'm expensive," I teased, standing up. "I know," he said, reaching out to fix my glasses, his fingers lingering on my cheek. "But I have the budget." He took my hand. We walked toward the gates together. We passed the spot where Julian used to hold court. He had transferred to a school in Europe after the scandal. We passed the library where we had first fought. We passed the ghosts of who we used to be. The invisible boy and the cold alpha were gone. In their place were partners. Dominic squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. "Where to?" I asked. Dominic looked at the horizon, at the city skyline rising in the distance. The Vance Global Tower dominated the view, a gleaming needle of glass and steel. But he didn't look at it with fear anymore. He looked at it like a conqueror. "Home," he said. And as we walked out of the gates and into the rest of our lives, I realized he didn't mean the mansion. He didn't mean the building. He meant us. End of story.